Here we are at lesson 8. We're beyond that 50% marker, and now this is where you get to customize things a little bit. Ecamm has a lot of great built-in tools for content creation. So when you're looking to make something real quick, it will do in a pinch. And in fact, there's a lot of complex graphics that you can do with it. But there are also other tools that exist out there that allow you to create things from templates that allow that creation process to go that much more quickly. And of course, I'm referring to things like Photoshop and Illustrator, and I'm not asking you to buy into any of those. If you have access to those, great. And you know how to create custom graphics, great. You could probably skip most of this lesson. Create a PNG file that's got a transparent background, and then you'll be able to slap it into Ecamm, and that'll be towards the latter part of this lesson anyway. What other stuff can we do? Well, we're going to do some overlays, some custom overlays, transparent overlays. Again, you're just giving that kind of customized touch to your Ecamm presentation. So let's go ahead and just roll with it. We're on a roll to begin with, so let's keep it going. Inevitably, you're going to run up against a wall when you want to create content for Ecamm that goes above and beyond what's in the feature set that's built into the product. And that's okay. You know, when you start to want to customize or put your logo in or do things that Ecamm can't do through its shapes and gradients and blending methods, you're going to have to go somewhere else. Fortunately, every Mac has a product on it that's free that does probably 80-90% of what you would want to do in most cases, and it's called Keynote. Now, a lot of people think of Keynote as a presentation tool, and that it is. It's a very good one, actually. It doesn't get a lot of love, though, when it comes to actually creating content that is custom artwork. Believe it or not, there's a lot in there. It's a very deep product, and the best part is it's free. Now, one of the things I really prefer about Keynote is the fact that it is a product that is vector-based, meaning you can scale things up and down on it, and they won't get pixelated. You know how when you zoom in on a photo, and the closer you get, the larger the pixels become. You see more blocky types of looks to it, and then when you zoom out, it looks nice and crisp. Well, that's called a raster format, and I'm sure at this point, you know, it's been decades now where the two formats have been around, and so you could think of a CAD program as a vector format or Illustrator as a vector format, where it doesn't matter how close you get in on that line, it's always going to be a perfect line. Whereas in something like Photoshop, the closer you get into a line, that line eventually you're going to start to see the pixels that make up that line, and then you're going to see, you know, slightly transparent pixels around it. That's called anti-aliasing, and that helps make a line that would look otherwise very blocky nice and smooth. But you see those details when you get in close on it. So with Keynote being a vector-based product, you can zoom in really quick, look at an image, and then zoom out, and it's going to look exactly the same. That's one of the things I love about it. That's one of the things why I use Illustrator over Photoshop when I'm doing a lot of my basic graphic design work. In Photoshop, I use when I'm actually editing photos or I'm doing things that go, well, let's just say a little bit beyond what Illustrator is capable of out of the box. But those are tools that you have to pay for a subscription. And we're trying to avoid that right now. You are just getting started with Ecamm. And so rather than spend some money on a piece of software, even a trial version of something, you've got Keynote. It's free. So let's dive in and let's see how we can create what's called the lower third. It looks like this. And we're going to create that today so that you can put this into the main window of your Ecamm presentation. So let's go ahead and go into Ecamm. And here I am. Now, something that I'm going to do a little bit differently this time is I'm actually going to quit Ecamm because we don't need it right now. And let's see, we'll go ahead and just select quit. Now, Ecamm, you do not have to save anything. it will automatically save the last known position, even if it somehow crashes. Ecamm generally does not crash, but when it does, it remembers the last position you were in. Okay, so then let's go into Keynote. Keynote is located in your Applications folder. If you go to Applications and then just scroll down until you see Keynote and double click to start that. Now, the first thing you may get is a What's New in Keynote window. That's fine. Just go ahead and click OK through that. We're not concerned with that right now. And you're going to see a bunch of themes and templates and things like that. For right now, we're going to go into a basic category. Click on the basic black. And then make sure you select, instead of wide 16:9, select standard 4:3. Remember, we're not creating a presentation here. We're creating a graphic that's going to sit inside of Ecamm, so you don't need a widescreen. You could use that if you wanted to. So you remember when we were creating a graphic, our photo for both the intro and the outro on the scenes? You could use that photo as a reference point so that you know where you are, where you're framed up. And I can show you how to do that. So, but for right now, we're just going to do standard 4:3 and then go ahead and click create. And it creates that. And immediately this window comes up. We do not need a title. We do not need a body. And author and date we can get rid of. Now, this is a title slide. Slides in Keynote are actually based on a template inside of Keynote. Let me go ahead and maximize this so you can see. Well, I don't like using maximize. Actually, I like to drag my windows up. Maximize kind of takes over everything, and it's a little bit harder to flip through stuff. Okay, so here's my screen. And what I'm going to do is, the first thing is I'm going to go into my view menu right here, right next to the zoom amount. And I'm going to go to edit slides. And here's my title slide here. And right now the current fill is set to black. We're going to roll with transparent because ultimately what we're going to do is create a lower third that goes underneath us on the screen, and we don't want to have any kind of black background or anything like that. So we're going to turn this off, and all you have to do is you go where it says color fill and say no fill. Now it's going to stay black, but it's gone at this point. And then you can just go back to your view menu and say exit slide layouts. So now here we are with a blank canvas. I also generally like to think that I want to have my presentation set up in a format that fits into the lower left-hand corner of the screen, and when it's coming across as my lower third. You may want to have yours come up dead center, or you may want to have it come in from the right and slide in. Whatever you choose to do, that's totally up to you. But keep in mind that even at 4K resolution, if you take 3160 and you divide it up by 3 rectangles, you're going to roll with roughly 1200 and something, right? My exact math is off. I'm not mathing right now. So we're going to make some adjustments real quick to this document. So over in the upper right-hand corner, we're going to size this document so that it's more like fitting into one of those squares. So I'm going to go to document here, and it says standard, it says slide size, and I'm going to choose custom slide size, and I'm going to choose 1280, and let's see. So 1280 by 300. And 1280 by 300 means that vertically it's only 300 pixels high. It's 1280 pixels wide. So if you want to let's just go ahead and do 3160 divided by 3. That gives us 1053. So at 1280, it's going to go slightly over that into the next grid, into the middle grid, which is fine. It actually looks kind of balanced. You don't want it going all the way dead center, but you don't want it all the way shoved in the corner. We're talking about the lower third. So I'll just leave it at 1280. So now I have 1280 here, and it's pretty dark, obviously. Let's see here. Let me set my screen. There we go. That's better. Now I can see things. It's kind of hard to see darkness when you've got all these lights on you. So I've got 4 lights looking at me right now, plus a light behind me. So there's a lot going on to make it so that I look pretty for you. All right. So let's get back into this and create a shape. Now, inside of Keynote, if I zoom in here, you see there's a bunch of different items that you can create and put into your presentation. And we're going to we're going to stick with shape and text for most of this. You could bring in things like media and other stuff like that. But for the purposes of this lesson, we're just going to focus on text and shapes. So we're going to create a shape. And in this case, I am going to start with a square. And that square, I'm going to drag out on either side and size it exactly like I want it. Okay, so you remember in the original graphic, what we did is we had a slightly rounded front edge, and then we had kind of this wingtail on the back. So how do you do that? Well, that's easy, actually. You just go into your shapes again, and in this case, I'm going to create a circle. And that circle, I'm going to center it up. Well, first of all, I want it roughly the size of my rectangle. The closer it is to the size, the better. Okay. So you can see now the circle has kind of come together. It's giving me a nice rounded edge. So if this is somehow something that we're going to move in, then it looks like almost like a bullet shape, right? Okay, so I'm going to create another shape, and in this case, I'm going to create a triangle. Now that triangle, I want to have, I'm going to make it black first. I'm going to change the fill. That's located under Style. So Format, Style. The way Keynote works up here in this part of the menu is that you've got these 3, I call them kind of like top level buttons. These control what shows underneath here. So Format then goes to Style, Text, Arrange, Animate, then goes Build In, Action, Build Out, and Document has Document and Audio. So most of the time you'll be in the Format section of this right-hand portion of the screen. So I want to subtract the triangle, right? So I want it to be so that it comes to a corner. So I'm just scaling. I'm pulling on the little handles, and I'm just scaling like that. So then I have my shape. However, now what I have is 3 independent shapes. So how do you make them all come together? Well, in the case of the circle and the rectangle, I want to join them. And I bet you didn't know this. If you haven't used Keynote a lot, you can simply drag those 2 shapes, which is the rectangle and the circle, then go to the Arrange tab, and then choose Unite. And now I have one shape that is comprised of the circle and the square. Now I still have my triangle here. Now I want to subtract that triangle from the square. So again, I'm going to select both of these. Now the way that this works is the top level of your vectors, and this works in almost every program. The top level, not your vectors, but your shapes, are going to be the operators, and then the operands are going to be the ones underneath. So in the case of if the triangle is in behind the shape, it'll give you the reverse effect of what you're looking for. So first things first, I'm going to make sure that that's in the front. It is. And then I'll select the two, and then I'll click subtract. And now what I have is one shape. Look at that. Bet you didn't know you could do that in Keynote, huh? So you've actually created something that other products that are out on the marketplace, whether they're trial versions or they're freemiums or whatever you want to call it, you have done something that is part of a free product that comes on your Mac. It's pretty awesome, actually. And the best part is, again, if I zoom in here, you see if I zoom in, everything just stays nice and crisp. Some people these days, the kiddos like to say crispy. Whatever. But you see, and I maybe goofed a little bit right there. You see that the circle maybe could have been slightly bigger to give me a smoother output there. It's not the end of the world, but I mean, if I wanted to, I would probably stress out about that. But if at the end of the day, it's about that big on the screen, you're never going to see that. Okay. So then, first things first, let's give this shape some kind of colorization to it. And if you recall back to the graphic that I created and showed you at the beginning of this lesson, it is kind of almost a 3D looking, kind of a wing. Again, it looks like a wing shape. This section where the circle is, that's going to be reserved for our product or company icon, right? And hopefully it's circular. Even if it's not, you can put it inside of a circle and crop it if you need to. So I want, first things first, I'm going to go over to Style, and with the fill section on this particular shape, I'm going to select Advanced Gradient Fill. Now, if I select Gradient Fill, this is a lot like what you can do in Ecamm. Now, you can't do this in Ecamm easily, meaning you can create a bunch of shapes and it kind of looks like this, but there's no Boolean operations, there's no advanced operations to take a bunch of different shapes and combine them or subtract them from each other. So that's something that you have to take into consideration. For instance, just for giggles, I'm gonna delete this, but I'm gonna go to a shape here and click on circle, and I'm gonna put it right here and scale it up just a little bit. If you hold down the shift key, it scales proportionately like that, right? Now, if I go into my arrange tab, you don't have to do this. I mean, if you want to play with it, you're absolutely welcome to. But I can then go subtract, and now look what's happened. That's actually cut out a hole from my shape, and if I move it, you see it is actually transparent. That is pretty cool. So you can do this. You can play and play and play, and you can edit these shapes, and you can get in at the vertex level. Vertex is where all the points come together. We're not going to do that for this lesson. That's saved for the Keynote intermediate and advanced courses coming up. But this is something that you can learn if you want to futz around with Keynote. You can absolutely do that. Okay, so we've got, let me go ahead and just undo that. We don't need that. And we'll go back to this guy and go to my style panel. So here's my gradient fill. Now, this is basic. It's basically a start color and an end color. You can adjust the angle of it, right? You can adjust whether or not you want it perfectly horizontal or perfectly vertical. You can swap the two colors. It's pretty straightforward. You can even add a border if you wanted to. So if I wanted a line around this and I wanted to make it white, for instance, I could go to the color palette here and boom, now I've got an outline. I'm not going to use an outline here. If you want to, you feel free to play. That's the whole purpose of this course. So if you wanted to add an outline and then keep it, you could, but it's going to impact some of the things that we're about to do. So I'm leaving that off for the moment. All right, so I don't like this look. I'm going to create something that's kind of like a metallic red color. And how do you do that? How do you make something kind of shiny with a little bit of shadows and maybe even a slight bevel to it? Well, the best way to do that is actually with an advanced gradient fill. So advanced, if I click on that, you'll see now I've got this gradient right here, and there's all these different there's a couple little marker points here, and then you got the slider in the center. So you could, for instance, you could weight it more towards the dark, or you could go this way and it's more light. But this is the best part. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first color here, which is red. Whoops, that fills it. Sorry. I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to change it to red. And you see already I've got this look going. And then I'm going to change this guy. I'm going to change it to white, and then drag the gray slider down so it's almost like a shadow. See that? But I'm going to create some other elements in here that's going to give me a look more towards what I'm looking for. And that is, I can now go into, for instance, with my red, I can drag the red over here, and then if you go right here and you click and add another flag, and all you have to do that is you just tap. And you see the little well, it doesn't show up here. Let me zoom in the other way. There we go. See that little plus right there? I'm just going to click. Now, if I click on that and go and make that white, look what that does. It creates this almost like this, you've got this light source above. Now, something else you can do here is you can increase the tightness. And you see what happens there? So if I wanted it to slowly blend, almost like it's like rounded, like a pill, I could do that. But I'm going to leave it right around there. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I've got the black there, but I'm going to take the red. And this is a cool part. You can go right next to the existing red here, click, and it'll add another one, and then you can just drag it over, right? And now what you've got is something where it's a lot more like a 3D object. And I wouldn't stress out about the fact that this part is not doing anything. That's okay, because we're going to cover that up anyway. So let me zoom out, and then we'll zoom in here. And you can see now what I've got going on is something that's much more akin to, it looks like it's slightly beveled. And you can play around with this until you're blue in the face. Seriously, you could go in, and if I wanted to create another red, one of the techniques you can do is if I click on that red, if I wanted to make it a little bit darker, right, I can do that. And so what that does is it almost makes it look like there's a slight bump on the top. You see that? And I can move that tighter. And then I could do the same thing over here. I could create this guy. I leave it the red that it is, but then the first red that we created, let me tap on it. All you have to do is just drag the color slider so it's using the red that you already selected and just picking a darker hue of it. And so it gives you a slightly different look. And I'll roll with this, okay? Now, next thing you want to do is I'm going to create the little grooves in the panel. So this is my base color. What's nice about this is that I can go back and change this color at any time if I want. If I wanted to select a different red, I would just go in and alter these 4 colors right here, make it whatever I want. But now I'm going to create a shape. It's another rectangle, and this one is going to go the extents of my lower third graphic here. And I'm going to also do a advanced. Okay, so now what I've got is, now that I've taken all the color out, I've got this kind of gray white color. And it's almost like it's beveled outward. Not almost, it looks like it's beveled outward. And I can kind of zoom in here. And that's not the effect that I want to go. I want to make it look like it's cutting inward. Okay. So first things first, we're going to create another graphic here. And this first white, there we go. And then the second white, I'm going to make it gray. And then I'm going to drag its opacity down. And same thing with this guy. Okay, so you see as you're playing around with the placement of these color flags that it alters the way things look. Now, I don't want that look. I want it to be black. So I'm going to select. This is, I've noticed that this might be a little bit of a bug with Keynote, but I want to make it look like it's going inward. So I'm going to create another one here, and that's going to go white with an opacity setting down like that. And then I'm going to do another one here that is kind of a gray. And then this one here, I'm going to drag its color settings down like that. So now what's happening as I drag this closer, you can see it's starting to look like a cutout, right? Like you've got a shadow. And then you can adjust, for instance, if I wanted it to be like a deep cut, almost, so to speak. You know, if I zoom out now, you can see what that looks like, right? So that's probably a little bit too deep for me. But you don't have to mess around with that too much. You can go ahead and play around with the opacity settings. So the more it goes towards the color of the object, the less shadow it looks like. See, but what I've done here is with a few flags here, and I'm just playing with these visually. So if I wanted this white to be a little bit like this, and it's probably, yeah, set the opacity to a brighter white, and then make it, I don't know why it's that color there, but I could see how it's white like that. So it's really picking up the light. And so now I could take this guy and move it down and maybe make this one, let's zoom out here, a little bit darker. Or, sorry, make it more opaque or more transparent. Whoops. See, sometimes if you don't have a color selected, what'll happen is, and you know it's selected because it's blue here, but I've noticed that Keynote will actually, it'll deselect those flags, and then you're messing around with the color swatches and they don't really do anything. Make sure that you have a little blue highlight around these little flags, just so you know. But you can see now what I've got going on here. This one, I'll set the opacity like this, and then the gray, I'm gonna move more towards black, and set its opacity pretty high so it cuts pretty good. And then I'll go to the white here and start to drag its opacity. See, it's like that. I'm going to drag its opacity. It's going to be white. And this one will be more like a bright edge almost. And you see I can play around with it, how deep it looks or how the groove looks, just by adjusting these colors where they are. And also, by the way, but in between each one of these flags is another, like a little marker up top. And this allows you to weight the color gradient, the shift from between the two colors, the two flags. You can weight it so that it's hard to see necessarily, not zoomed in here. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer. There we go. You see, as I play around with this, and then so this guy, for instance, this one here, I want its opacity, and maybe I want it more red. So I'm going to click right next to it and then drag that guy out and maybe set its opacity there and then move this guy like that. And really what I want, though, is I want this section to look a little bit darker, not lighter. So in this case, I would drag like this one here. I would drag it more towards black, and this one, same thing. I would drag it more towards black. And so you see now what I've done is I've created a slightly darker version of the red, so it looks like it is cut out and there is a bit of a shadow. So I know that seems like a lot, and it is. To get the hang of something like this does take a little bit of practice. But really, this is all done through gradients. You can create effectively what looks like a 3D object out of using a combination of gradients and highlights so that you can create that look you're looking for. So we're going to leave this as is for the moment. And then I'm going to, now here's the fun part. All right, so I click on this and I click Command C and then Command V, and of course it pastes it, right? Now, let's say I want it about right there. And then CV again. Now it's going to be slightly offset, but if I just drag it back, it'll center. But look at that. See the little guides there? So it's actually creating identical spacing for me. And this is yet another tool that does not exist within Ecamm, this kind of ratio between objects. So now what I've created is a series of grooves. And the only thing I want to do now at this point is I want to drag the bottom down just a hint of the overall piece so that I've now gone ahead and simply set it up so that everything's kind of, I don't know the best way to describe it, balanced. Yeah, it's balanced. And trust me, if I have more time with this, I don't want to, we're already, let's see, we're quite far into this. Yeah, we're already 40 minutes in, and this is how far we've gotten. So granted, I did talk a little bit at the beginning, but you can see now. And you're like, okay, well, what about over here? Good question. So what I'd like to do, first thing, is I just want to get these kind of as close to the edge as possible. And the reason why I do that, so you're pulling it in like this. So first of all, you can drag these, so they're roughly about the same distance. Keep in mind that we're putting a graphic here. If you wanted these to go all the way through, you certainly could do that. But, okay. You just don't want to go too far off the corner here, off the edge. So I'm just going to drag again, and I want to make sure that my look across the board is correct. So then it's like, well, okay, that looks decent, but you've got all these little white lines now. I do. You're absolutely right. So how you do that, how you get rid of that, is you subtract another object from them. The thing is that there's multiple objects here. So how do you handle that? You do it by making the shapes editable. Now, I think for the interest of speed, we're going to make one shape editable, and then we're going to recopy it. So I'm going to go back into Keynote here, and I'm just going to delete these objects that I just created. I know you're like, oh, we just did that. That's okay. This is something that when you're working with Keynote, this is something you think of ahead of time. And so what I'm going to do, let me zoom in on this edge here. Okay, first things first, we can see that this is not quite where we want it to be. So I'm going to drag it just a little bit outside. Come on. There we go. And then I'm going to right click on this image and say, make editable. And then what happens is it creates these control points. And I can select my individual control points here. And if I hold down my shift key, it keeps it linear. So I'm going to go right there. And then I'm going to click this guy, then hold down the shift key again and move it just like so. And I go back to this guy. And now I've got something that's nice and cut. Now, if I go back to it, it will be a singular shape again. And then you'd have to right click again and say make editable. And then your pieces are there again. So now how do you do this? How do you, now that I've got my groove on, I want to go ahead and copy these and make it so that I can, it's going to be a constant angle, right? So what I can do is copy, paste, right? And we want it let's zoom out. There we go. And CV. Don't worry about the right-hand side. That we're going to fix in a second. That's actually super easy to fix. So let's make sure we're properly aligned. CV. And we'll just drag it over. And then CV. And we'll do it one more time. There we go. And now, look what you got. You got perfect cutouts that terminate correctly on the left-hand side. Now, what about the right-hand side? Well, these are easy. You just click the middle handle here, and then you just size it. You can click on this guy. Same thing, size it. It doesn't have to be perfect, because remember, again, we're going to, if you can't zoom for some reason, I can, but if you can't, you can always just go to the zoom pull down menu and select the size you want to work at. And then we'll bring this over. And there we go. So now off to the left-hand side, I've got my nice cutout. And now I want to do my right-hand side. So what do you want to put here? Well, I think in the interest of keeping things, kind of consistent, what we're going to do is create another circle, but this time we're going to make it look like it's going in instead of out, kind of like the grooves here. So to do that, you go to Shapes, go to your circle, and size it up so that it's the right size, and obviously covering. If it's not covering your cutouts, move your cutouts. See, like I can see this top one here. Let me get in closer on this. So yeah, I can see right here well, first of all, I want to get that like that. And now I'm going to size this guy back behind. And same thing with this one, back behind. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is create a 3D effect with this circle. So how do I do that? Well, same thing. You go to Style, and then you can create a color that you might want to use for this particular, or you pick a gradient that you might want to use for this particular shape. So in the case of this one, we'll just go to Color Fill, and then select Advanced Gradient. And now it's going to use the last gradient that we created, which is not the one we want. We want something different than this. So first things first, we will go ahead and just pull each one of these out. And you can see they're gone. There we go. And we want these both at 100% opacity. So now it's black like that. And so now we want to create this little divot, right? So in this case, there's two ways to do this. One way is you pick your base color, and then on top of that, you apply the cutout, kind of like we did with these guys, with the main wing portion. And the reason why you would do something like that is, let's say it's like, oh, this color's all wrong. Well, all you have to do is select the color underneath, and then the gradients on top of it will react with the new colors. So I'm kind of what you would effectively call hard coding this in, and that's just in the interest of speed. Once you get the hang of it, you can overlay these gradients on top of. I mean, if you look at, if for instance, if I go back to this guy here and pull it off, it's still solid underneath. So I could change that color, and then that's the reason why I did that way, is so that if I wanted to go through and say, well, I don't want, if I click on this object, I don't want it to be red. I want it to be some other color, or I want it to make it look metallic or something like that. I could go in and just adjust these colors like I mentioned earlier. So I'm gonna do this one though. I'm gonna hard code because we're gonna put a graphic inside of there, and I'm not gonna. We just want to make sure that it looks somewhat appropriate. So we've got our advanced color fill, and this time there's two different types of gradients that Keynote works with. It's got a linear and a radial. So we'll select radial, and you can see there's a little handle that pops out here. So this allows you to set not only the center point of the radial, but then if you wanted to, say, make it more elliptical or something like that, you could do that. So we could go ahead and pick our start color like that. And already you can see that that's looking pretty decent. So for instance, if I wanted to go ahead and make this, a little bit, well, let's do this. We want it so that we want to have more red. Come on. There we go. And maybe we want this red a little bit darker, but we want to kind of weight it towards the darker color here, and then we're going to just start to squeeze it, right? And this one you could and say like, well, I want to copy this, and I'm going to make it even tighter here, right? And then make this darker, like that. So now what I've effectively done, you can see it looks like I've kind of carved out a shape here. So any thoughts on what we're going to put inside there? How about the Ecamm rotating logo? That would be pretty cool, huh? So let's go ahead and do one more thing, because I already think this looks pretty slick as is. Right, we've got a nice like light source from the top. We've got it cut out here. If you wanted to, you could make this lighter down here. I'm not going to mess with that. That's just it would basically be taking this gradient that we just created, creating a copy of that, and then making that linear. And then, oh heck, I'll just show you. Why not? V and then V. Okay, so I thought that was what the case was. All right, we're going to make this linear, right? Now, instead of red, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make these white, and I'm going to make it slightly. I'm going to take this guy, make this 100% transparent, and move something like this. All right, and then so we've got this one selected. It is white. Drag that opacity up as much as we want. All right, so now it's blending in with what's behind. And then, if I don't like that, like for instance, that black that's right there, I could just get rid of this. And so it's just white there. And then arrange that. And the other object should be right behind it, but I don't need to mess with it at this point. So now what I've got is my light source is hitting the cutout too. And I could tighten that up if I wanted to. I could go to style, and if I liked, for instance, that white, but I wanted it to be a bit tighter, I could do something like that, right? Where it's maybe this opacity is down, but as it gets closer and closer to the end here, it's pretty, yeah, like that. See, and that's all with gradients. I mean, it looks, it's not a true 3D effect, so I don't want you to get the impression that you're creating something that somebody's going to go, wow, that's amazing 3D. It's not, but it looks really, really good, and it looks far and above better than anything else that you would create. Then what you can do is you can group all of this. So I can select everything here. I'm going to turn this guy off. We'll just set the opacity down to 0. So this is another way to control it. So once you've created something, you can't, there's no layers like Photoshop or Illustrator where you can turn layers on and off. But what you can do is you just set the opacity all the way down to 0. And then that way it will remove that object effectively from the scene. And a lot of the inexpensive or beginner designer tools work this way too. So it's not anything out of the ordinary. And so now we've got this. So now I've got this set up exactly like I want. And I am going to put my name in here. Now, this is something that we're doing what is kind of a step into you're dipping your toe into the intermediate section of Keynote, but this is important, at least to me, to see some of the power that's available to you in Keynote, because it does things that Ecamm is not capable of doing, and you want to make sure that you have all the tools at your disposal. You know how to use them, at least at a rudimentary level. So let's go ahead and add just a little bit of animation where your name comes up and then disappears along with the object, this whole object, the wing that we've created. So I'm going to select this entire wing, and you just click drag to do that. And then I can go to the Arrange tab and select Group. So that's now treated as one group. And now I'm going to create some text, which is really tiny. Let's go ahead and say 120. There we go. And then you can type in your name. Oops. If you can't select it, sometimes you're selecting the group behind it. Just type your name. Right? And then drag it back. Now, if you don't have, if your name doesn't fit inside this graphic, you can size it. Just go to the Text tab and set your size here under point. And then you can also pick your, like if I wanted to go Herculaneum, and then that's too big, so I'll go 100, right? And that's too small, so 110. You can play with these little up-down arrows. This is set to regular. If I wanted to do something else, I'm not a big fan of that one, but let's see. I am a fan of arcade games, though. There we go. 8-bit look. I like that. So now we'll go ahead and make this 120. Right? It's going to freak people out, right? Because what you see is this really nice, smooth graphic, and then your name comes up and it looks like you're zoomed in, or you're playing like Super Mario Brothers or something like that from back in the 80s. And then you just pick your color. So one way to do this, there's a lot of ways, but colors, like if you're dealing with red, if you've not played around with this at all, the way the color wheel works is that the color immediately opposite the other side of your color selected is the complementary color. So if I were to take my text and make it this blue, that complementary color means that there's a significant contrast between the two. Now, this looks pretty gaudy to me, so I'm going to maybe tint it towards that blue, but you can see if I go pure cyan, it is very much in your face, but you can drag towards the center of the circle, and that gets you more towards pure white. So maybe I just want to just slightly tint it, that color, that complementary color. So that's what I've done, and I'll go ahead and close that. And that's not as gaudy, but obviously being from New Orleans, gaudy's all what I'm about, so it doesn't really matter in my mind. But if you're trying to create a professional presentation, obviously you can pick something else. And then your styles, your spacing, all that stuff can be controlled here. For instance, my character spacing is a little tight, so if I wanted to expand it out a little bit so things are not right on top of each other, I could do that. And then I could set my overall size down, so I want a little bit of a gap in between. You can see some fonts, like if you look right here, I'm not a fan of that. So that's enough for me to change the font. To be honest with you. All right, I'm sorry. Okay, another pet peeve, and I talked about this already, and I'm catching myself. It's a typeface. It's not a font. So they call it. Ooh, even Apple calls it a font. Shame on you, Apple. I'm sure somebody at Apple's like, it's supposed to be that way, but we're not gonna. I'm just gonna pick something. Arial black. That's fine. Okay, that's a better spacing. And actually, I'm going to go back to my character spacing here. Just set it to 0. And you see, this is a lot of this is when you're doing stuff like this, you're essentially what you're doing is you're putting in elements that require tweaking to get it to the way you like it. And chances are, if you're good at this and you really are trying to achieve a look, you could spend an entire day just getting this one graphic right. I know because I do that. And it's not, what we're doing right now is really something that I already have pre-programmed in my mind. This is what I want to teach you. But if I was doing this for myself, I may want something completely different or go in a different direction or make multiple copies of something before I'm satisfied with it. That's okay. As long as you got time for it, might as well do it, right? So we got our name in, and this is going to be where the Ecamm graphic goes. I'm going to choose to put it inside of Ecamm, and I'm not. Let's just say I'm not the biggest fan of doing it this way because Ecamm doesn't give you timing controls. And what's going to happen is we're going to have to kind of fudge things a little bit. Not my favorite way to do it, but life goes on. So let's go ahead and we're going to do one more thing here. We're gonna make our name come in. We're going to make this whole thing wipe in from the left, and then our name will dissolve in. Okay, and it'll hold for a couple of seconds, and then it'll dissolve out, and then so everything will dissolve out together. Okay, so this goes back to some of the coolest tools that Keynote has to offer that goes well beyond what Ecamm can do with its transitions. If I go into the Animate main tab here, and I click on that, and I select my back graphic, the wing, and I click Add an Effect. It's under Build In right now. So what I want it to do is I can have it move in like this, and you can hit Preview. Right? Come on. Like that. I could do that. And maybe that's the effect you want. I could tell it to wipe. So again, what would happen is you'd get something like that. And let's see, there's all kinds, there's fade and move. So I could do that. Something like that. You can't do those kinds of things with an Ecamm. I mean, look at all the transitions here. Blurring. So it starts out blurry and then slowly comes into focus. These kinds of things you just can't do. You can have all these wild effects. I would not recommend anything that's under special effects because it will happen all the way to the extents of your animated area, meaning if you've got a frame, that frame acts as your border. So for instance, if I were to choose Comet, that was quick, but if I chose that the comet's glow actually goes above and below this graphic, and I don't want that. So what we're going to do is just go ahead. We'll go ahead and select Move In. Or you know what? We'll do Wipe In because I think wipe, that's not something that you're used to seeing in Ecamm. So we're going to do that. We'll do Wipe In, and we'll say from the left, we're going to say duration and direction. We'll say it takes 1 second. That's good. You could have it be 2 to make it look a little bit slower, 3 if you really want to go slow, but I wouldn't go any slower than 3 seconds. And then pick your name, and for add an effect, I'm going to have this one dissolve in. So now, so I'm doing this all under the Animate tab. So now I've got the wing graphic and then my name. If I click the play button and hit the space bar, see it plays that. I hit the space bar again, and then my name appears. So now that's the way it's going to animate in Ecamm. Now, obviously, we're not hitting the space bar in Ecamm, so how do you adjust that? Well, you go to the Build Order tab, which is down here at the bottom of Keynote. And you can see right here, you've got this, let me zoom in here. And see, we've got the group wipe, and then we've got dissolve, right? And so we're going to separate those, or sorry, we're going to group those. We're going to group their animations. So first things first, the wipe, we're going to say, we're going to start it after the transition, which means as soon as I play the presentation, it'll start and no delay. And then my name will be, it says start on click. Well, we're not clicking. There are ways to deal with this inside the export process, but we're going to select after build 1. Okay, so you see what happens here? Let me go back to that real quick. You see on click, you see how they're separated here in Keynote? That's to tell you that there is this gap that exists between them. That means that these are independent animations that require a click to advance to the next one. So I'm going to select after build 1. Again, no delay. And then we'll zoom out here. And then I'll press play again. And look at that. Now it's up. So now we need to have it all dissolve, right? So at this point, I'm going to select the first one, the wing here, and then I'm going to click on build out, add an effect, and then have it dissolve. And it goes away like that. And then I'm going to click on my name, do the same thing, build out, add effect, dissolve. Now they're happening at different times, so we want them to happen together. Here we go again to build order. And I'm going to click on dissolve here. And instead of on click, I'm going to say with build 3. And so now there's this little click in between them. And I'll show you why this is important when we export the file. But if I go ahead and click play, you see it comes up. Then if I hit the space bar, they both go away. Perfect, right? Right, and we're going to drag that Ecamm animation in here, and our click is still in here, so it's still waiting for that. So I'm going to go back to my class and imagine, create, repeat, loop, movie. Right, see that there? And this, like I'm saying, is that you have a lot more flexibility on timing here. So I'm going to drag this in. Okay, fine. It might not play on iPhone and iPad. That's fine. Now, it's almost like it was made for this. Look at that. So I'm just dragging it, sizing it. All right, so let's just click play. Look at that. Okay, without doing any of the timing stuff, that looks pretty sick. I mean, I like that look. If you wanted to tint this, you could to make it match your text. Or I could just go back and say, you know what? I want my text to be, instead of it being this kind of cyan look, maybe I want it to be, go to the Format tab and click on my text, and instead of it being what it is, right, and my text being that color, maybe I change it to just white. See what I'm saying about designing and tweaking, right? Especially since we're a good hour and 15 into the lesson. Okay, so how do we control this? Well, this is just all part of timing, right? So let's go ahead and we're going to have this appear after everything is built, right? So maybe it happens at the same time that my name or your name shows up, right? So let's go ahead and have you go to the format menu, click on your animation, and then underneath the movie tab here, we're going to set the repeat to loop. That's it. So now, one other thing we want to do is we want to have it come in, we want to have it dissolve in when the name appears. And but actually, probably what I want to do is start it just a tad bit sooner. So we're going to play around with the timing a little bit. So we'll go ahead and click on animate, and in build in, we're not going to tell it start movie because it'll start playing. So we're going to change that to dissolve, and then go to build order again. And we're going to drag this into my grouping here. And so now it is set to happen after build 1. So what if I said, let's do this. Let's have it go with build 1. Let's preview that. Okay, that's good. But maybe delay that build by 1 second. Or maybe 2 seconds. Okay, well, it's not really change. Oh, that's why. Because the dissolve is taking a half second. So we're going to delay this by, well, no. We're going to delay it by 0.5 seconds. And let's see. That may not just play inside Keynote. Yeah, that's what it was. So look what's happening right there. All I did was let's go back. I hit play. So let me just repeat the steps real quick in case you weren't following. So I click on the animation under build in. I set it to a half second to build in, and then I went to build order, and I moved this imagine, create, repeat underneath the grouping. Remember, this gap here indicates it's going to wait for spacebar or mouse click input, and that's something we're going to adjust on the timing. And it is now part of that, and then I set it to with build 1, but to wait a half second. So maybe, and for some reason preview is not showing that. So maybe if I set this to 0.75, it'll wait till it gets a little bit closer. Let's see. There we go. That's what I wanted. That's exactly what I wanted. So we're going to play around with some of the timing changes. First and foremost, we notice that we had our build order. Our build order was set to have a click. So instead of using the timing and having things wait for a click and stuff like that, in order to have this thing behave exactly like we want it to, we're just going to take over full control over the lower third. So the best way to do that is to just go in and mess with our build order a little bit, insert some delays, and then boom, just export it. Okay, so we're going to go to build order here, and notice we have our click in here. All right, there's our gap. And I'm going to change this group to be starting after build 3. So that's when my name comes up. But I'm going to build in a 5, oops, come on, you can type, a 5-second delay. So now, if I click on play inside of Keynote, 3, 4, 5, boom, goes away. So now I have a 1 second build roughly, and then a 5 second sitting on the screen, and then a 1 second dissolve. So all told 7 seconds or so, which is kind of borderline where as far as you want to take it out. Unless you want to keep it on screen, then you don't have to worry about the build out transitions. You can just leave it there. Just leave it spinning. That's fine. It's up to you. So we will, and you have to be careful about that one, but we're not going to get into the whole editing thing here. So we'll go ahead and export this. So File, and then we'll export to a movie. Self-playing. We'll leave all this stuff as is because we're not even using these timings. And our custom settings. Click Save, and then I'm just going to overwrite. Yes, I want to get rid of it because it was trash. Hot trash. And we'll export it. Boom. It's now exported. Let's go back into Ecamm Live. And then we'll click on the gear icon, choose Replace Asset. We'll load up our lower thirds. That kind of reloads the way the file itself. So even if you have the file in the exact same location, when you overwrite it, it sometimes doesn't show up in Ecamm. So it's best to just say replace asset or delete it in Ecamm and then re-add it. Either way. So now I'll turn this lower thirds off, and then I'll put it back on. And there it is. Look at that. Pretty rad, huh? So yes, it took a little bit of time because we went through and did some design elements, and we did some things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do out of the gate. This is borderline intermediate, if not a little bit intermediate, because we added some animation in here. But I wanted you to see that to kind of wet your whistle as to what kinds of things are available inside of Keynote. Keynote has a lot of great things for building out. Ecamm has nothing for building out. When you switch to a scene, it will remove any overlays that you want to remove, but it doesn't have sit on the scene for this many seconds and then go away. So without that kind of animation control, you're either left with toggling the overlay on or off, which is a pain in the butt. If you're trying to have things just happen automatically during your presentation and you don't want to have to worry about your settings and whatnot, you want to have it in there and you get the timing right before you actually go live or before you actually stream. This is a way to do it. And the thing about Keynote also is that it offers a vast array of animation capabilities in both a build-out form and a build-in form. And of course, you can integrate, as we just saw, a QuickTime movie into Keynote. We just saw that you can import a QuickTime movie into Keynote and have that play as part of it as well. So that's it. I know it's a lot, and I thought that this would be a very short and to the point lesson, but notice this is the part that's really important. There's no other tool that is free that can do what Keynote can do. There's nothing. So you have the power to do what we just did and so much more. I mean, you think about all the animations you could do on your overlays. Keep it mild. You don't need to go crazy with it, but a lower third, an animated lower third is totally acceptable, especially if you're going to have it yank off the screen. You want the focus to be on you ultimately. And then when you need to call attention to something, that's when you use an animation. That's when you use a fancy graphic, but you don't have to have that on all the time. Matter of fact, that detracts from your overall presentation. So that's that. It's a lot. And I think, though, it's really cool that these two applications work so well together. And there's a lot more to it inside of Keynote that I haven't even scratched the surface of. But you just created your very first animated lower third graphic, not even using Ecamm, but using another application. congratulations. That's quite an accomplishment. And you're on your way to creating even more cool graphics as you continue on your journey for learning. So next lesson, this is going to be a big one for us because this is the first time we're actually going to record something. So get your bullet points ready. If you want to use a script, you can use a script. I would advise against it unless you do have a teleprompter like we talked about. Just create some bullet points, write them down. What do you want to talk about? What have you created your 3 scenes for? What's your thing? You know, I'm using my sunglasses as something I'm going to talk about, and we're going to record 3 to 5 minutes of a presentation that's going to integrate the elements of Ecamm, and then we're going to go into YouTube and upload that file, and then you'll be able to watch it on YouTube, which is pretty cool. All right, so rest up. The next one's going to be a biggie, and I hope you're ready for it. And if you missed anything in this particular lesson, there was a lot to cover and a lot of things that are unique to Keynote. Just like Ecamm is its own unique package, so is Keynote. But the two work well together, and hopefully you were able to get it to work. If not, you can reach me and ask me any questions. Okay, and then I've also put some of the files that I've created, so if you want to cheat and use my Keynote presentation and just plop it in there on your own, you can do that. I would advise against it, but if you want to, you can certainly do that. All right, take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.